It was a deal that was 12 years in the making.
I want to say to the great Iranian nation, God has answered your prayers.
Today, after 2 years of negotiations, the United States, together with our international partners, has achieved something that decades of animosity has not.
Much more than a deal to curb Iran's atomic ambitions, the agreement struck in Vienna after a final 18-day marathon paves the way for an historic thaw in relations between Iran and the West. We'll obviously go over what's in the deal to monitor Iran's nuclear program, how sanctions will be gradually lifted, moreover, how it will be sold to hostile hawks, both in Washington and in Tehran, and how, if it all goes to plan, it would reshape relations in a region that's in turmoil. Today in the France 24 debate, Iran, the breakthrough, and with us from Vienna, France 24's Sanam Chantier, who's been following those negotiations. Joining us from Boston, Kelly Golnish-Niknejad, editor-in-chief of Tehran Bureau, which gives people a unique eye into what's going on inside of Iran. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks as well from Washington, Lee Smith, senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, senior editor at the Weekly Standard. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And in our studios, Israeli-born journalist Gil Mehaly, editor-in-chief of Causeur.fr. Tell us what Causeur is.
It's a monthly and news magazine and an internet site.
Okay. Also with us, Jamshid Asadi of the Burgundy Business School. Welcome to the show. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter. Our hashtag F24Debate. Sanam Chantier in Vienna. When did you know you'd have a Bastille Day deal in?
Francois, this isn't just a Bastille Day deal. This is also a deal a day prior to the birthday of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. And we were hearing murmurs of this last night from a number of Western diplomats. Now, we have to remember that this is the longest negotiation held by a high-ranking US diplomat in 4 decades. And it's not just been happening over the past 18 days that we've been following these negotiations. It's been happening for some 22 months. Now, there have been some struggles. There have been many toing and froings, specifically because we're hearing that the large number of negotiators here in Iran, both in Vienna, both the Iranians and the world powers are over 60. Some of them have had ailments, including the US Secretary of State, John Kerry, and of course, Iran's atomic energy chief agent, Ali Akbar Salehi. Now, reportedly, there was one particularly colorful story that we heard coming out of the negotiations when tempers were fraying, which was reportedly the EU's Federica Mogherini threatening to walk away from the negotiating table, in which she had a very heated response from Iran's foreign minister, who said, "Never threaten an Iranian." This went viral, of course, across social media, and that was one of the heated stories that we heard about. Of course, Iranian officials were also briefing us here, saying that the West was coming back to the table with certain agreements that they had previously actually resolved. But we have to remember, and I reiterate this, it's not just the past 18 days that the two sides have managed to narrow the gaps. They've been working on this for 22 months since they managed to sign that interim agreement back in Geneva.
And as you were telling us on Monday, Sanam, there really was the sense that it was this time or nothing.
Absolutely. I think that both sides made it clear that this isn't certainly the time to walk away and do what they've done previously, which is go back to their respective capitals. We're talking about Tehran and Washington. Every time they do that, they are met with opponents, hawks in the US and hardliners in Iran, and they come back essentially to square one. They really wanted to get this done because there's also a question of whether the administrations that follow in Tehran and Washington, we're talking about the president that comes after Obama and of course Rouhani, whether they'd have the same political will to get this done.
All right, let's get reactions from the rest of our panel. Let me begin with you, Kelly Golnish-Niknejad. How much of a historic day is it for Iran and for the region?
Well, it's From the Iranian perspective, it's huge. And I saw that someone had said that it's more important and more powerful than when Iran-Iraq war came to an end in terms of what it's going to mean domestically and, in the region, internationally. And in terms of the region, it's a huge paradigm shift in favor of Iran. So there's a lot of happy people on the Iranian side all around.
When you say a paradigm shift in favor of Iran, what do you mean?
It means that it strengthens Iran's hand in the region. It's now allied with the United States in its fight against ISIS in Afghanistan, in Iraq, and in Syria. And it's no longer dealing in isolation. This is an agreement that has the world powers behind it. So it's, I think, after there's been a huge revolution on the scale that we had in Iran in 1979, it takes about 50 years or so for everything to shift. And I think this might have been like the final push. It's been happening little here and there since 1979. And this is a very important event to watch.
And does a win for Iran mean a loss for the West?
No, not at all. I think in this case, considering how badly things are going in the Middle East, Iran is actually seen as a stabilizing power. So I think everyone is happy about the prospect of quashing ISIS with the help of Iran, who has many years of experience in the region.
Lee Smith, do you agree?
No, I don't understand how Iran is a stabilizing force in the Middle East at all. And the idea that they're fighting merely ISIS is not borne out by any evidence. In the Syrian civil war, there are close to 250,000 people who've been killed by the Assad regime and other Iranian assets. I don't see how that's stabilizing the region in the least. And I don't think this deal will help either.
Nonetheless, if it means in the long run the fighting of ISIS in Iraq, there are even hints that we've seen in the past that perhaps this could, in Syria, mean that the battle lines will become clear.
Yeah, no, I think the battle lines are already clear, and I think it's important to understand ISIS as part of a larger rebellion in the region, which is the Sunnis rebelling against the Iranian security architecture from Lebanon to Syria to Iraq. And this is an enormous issue. It's not stabilizing. It's the Iranian regime that has helped build this war, helped foment this war, and is now pouring resources into Syria and Iraq to wage its war, not simply against ISIS. No one is pro-ISIS. The issue is that they're killing regular Sunnis. 7-year-old girls in Syria, these are also jihadis. These are also ISIS. That's who the Assad regime and Iranian assets, Hezbollah, who they're killing. How is this stabilizing? How is this deal that is going to provide tens of billions of dollars worth of immediate sanctions relief and will eventually lift the arms embargo on the Iranians, how is that going to help stabilize the region? This makes no sense at all. It's not about the Iranian nuclear program. It's about a larger Iranian project around the region. It's not stabilizing.
Gilma Haley, we heard the remarks.
Can I interject from here?
Sure, go ahead, Sanam Shantier.
I just want to remind you of a comment made by not just the country's foreign minister, Mohammad Javad Zarif, who actually posted a message on YouTube making it very clear. So this wasn't just a subtle reference, but he actually said that if there is a detente with the international community and if they manage to sign this final comprehensive agreement, that they will be fighting alongside the US forces the threat of ISIS in the region. Add to that that the country's deputy minister, Abdullahian, said that they don't necessarily see the Assad regime as a long-life regime, as a long-life presidency. So there is a willingness to withdraw their support for some anti-Western sources in the region if this, obviously this deal goes through, which it has.
All right, Gilma Haley, we heard the Israeli Prime Minister on message after the announcement, but we've seen, for instance, reactions out of Lebanon, where our correspondent telling us that politicians there from across the divide, some financed by the Saudis, others financed by the Iranians, all saying this could be an occasion to tone it all down.
But I think this is the gamble, and to put it in a very general terms, Obama is betting on Iranian society against the Iranian regime. And Israel doesn't believe that this change is coming. And contrary to what Obama said, in Israel, Netanyahu doesn't believe that it's a verify agreement. He believes it's a trust agreement. Because in 2 or 3 years, when the anti-Iranian front that negotiated the deal will be dismantled, when the sanctions will be abandoned, it's only illusionary to think that there will be kind of a mechanism like in a cartoon. When you do a mistake, you get a hammer on the head. We don't know in 2 or 3 years where will be China, where will be Putin or another Russian president. It's an illusion. What we know that there won't be anymore this group that enforces sanctions, that negotiates, and it all rests on the engagement took by the Iranians to stay a threshold nuclear power and not to become a nuclear power. It's all about trust, and this is why it's a huge bet. It's a huge gamble.
Jamshid Asadi, a gamble worth taking?
Certainly. Before going to this comment, I would like to come back on one of your questions to one of your correspondents. Is it a loss for the West? Is it a win for Iran? I would say this is a win for Iran. This is a loss for the Islamic Republic, and this is a oof for the West. So now coming back...
A loss for the Islamic Republic. Why?
Well, because this is not what Islamic Republic wanted to do. Islamic Republic wanted to have the potential of atomic bomb, to have a master position in the region. So because of all the problems, damages, especially in economy, the Islamic Republic, especially with this fraction, which is much more pragmatist than the fraction hardliners, ideologists, they have accepted the rule of the game asked from the very beginning by the West. So it cannot be a win for the Islamic Republic, but it's certainly a win for Iran because that was damages over damages over damages for the country.
Geli Kolnishniklijad, when you woke up in Boston this morning, you tweeted about the anxiousness about what comes next for Iran on that score.
Yes, I mean, I think the most nuanced response that I got from one of the Iranians I asked about how they felt about it, it was described as a bittersweet victory because this deal was a lifeline to a brutal regime. And this regime negotiated because they are pragmatic and they believe in self-preservation. And that's what's going to happen. So, part of it is that, and others I spoke to said that, whether we have this deal or don't have this deal, we're going to have to live under this government. So it's, doing a balancing test, the pros overcome the negatives, and the potential of actually moving towards a more democratic society is much more likely to happen when we are engaged in trade with the rest of the world, not when we're in isolation. So, and I think right now the pressure is on President Rouhani is to show that he can deliver economic relief very quickly, because that's what the expectation is in Iran. So we're going to have to see how that plays out.
And it's nighttime now in Tehran, where, according to Newswire reports, after the breaking of the fast, it's the month of Ramadan, we're getting word that Iranians have taken to the streets to celebrate the nuclear deal. Lee Smith, your reaction here. You've heard our panelists say a win for Iran, but a loss perhaps for the regime.
I'm afraid I have to disagree with that. I wish that it was a win for the Iranian people. I wish it was I wish that it would encourage moderation and more pragmatism. But the reality is that the deal over the nuclear weapons program, it's the IRGC that controls, it's the hardliners that control the nuclear weapons, program. The United States, the White House has made a deal over the nuclear weapons program with the people who control it. I know who is out front, Mr. Zarif, Mr. Rouhani is the president. However, the United States now has an investment in ensuring that the nuclear file is not traded around within the regime. We don't want to see the nuclear file get knocked around. I'm sorry to say that what has happened is the United States has invested in the IRGC with this deal. We've not invested in moderation. We've not invested in the pragmatist. We've invested in the hardliners. It's a terrible thing. And I'm happy that the Iranians are feeling optimistic about something, but I'm afraid they're going to be sorely disappointed by this.
All right. Gil Mahili, on that point, we heard President Obama mention all the levers, of course, that the United Nations will have at its disposal.
On the paper, yes, but let's imagine what's happening in 2 or 3 years. Sanctions are out, and let's say that Iran is supposedly broke the agreement. Between the moment that someone says that there is a breach and the moment there will be sanctions again, first of all, you need to convince everyone that the facts are the facts. And the Iranian, of course, will dilute it, will water it, will say it's not exactly like that, and they will win time. And then there will be a crisis in the Ukraine, and the Russians would like to have leverage over the United States. They will stall. Once you dismantle this mechanism, once you dismantle the...
it's hard to put back together.
It will be almost impossible. We shouldn't have any illusions. In a matter of 18 or 20 or 24 months, it will be all about trust.
All right, we'll pick up on those points when we come back. You're watching the France 24 debate.